Joining us now, longtime general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, straight from his office at the team's facility, an excellent and beautiful facility, by the way. I was there a couple of years ago right after it opened. He's Rick Spielman. Rick, welcome back. How are you, pal?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me on today.
Great to talk to you, and I've been looking forward to asking you this question. Contents of the first communication between you and your brother Chris when he took a job with the Lions.
He asked how my mother was doing, and so I filled him in on that and caught up on a lot of family things, but nothing business related. But no, I was very excited for him. I know it's a great opportunity for him just to be involved. And, you know, Detroit is home for him. That's where they drafted. That's where he was drafted, and felt that if he can somehow get in there in whatever capacity, help and be an assistant to the owner, and, you know, the head coach and the GM will make all the calls in there, but any way he can assist, I know he's looking forward to doing that.
Well, it has to change things, though, from the perspective of how willing you'll be to bounce ideas off of him. You're going to be more guarded. He's going to be guarded. That's got to be the dynamic now. You're both working for enemy teams in the same division.
Yeah, well, well, it'll be interesting. It was fun when we played him in the last game this year, although he just got up there just to see him. But you know, we've always, even when he was a broadcaster, we never crossed the line on what he had to do from an integrity standpoint, or me giving him any insider information that I wouldn't give anything else. So we understand where that line is from the business side of it, but he is also my brother, probably my closest friend in the world. And we, you know, I talk to him almost on a daily or every other day basis.
Have you at least asked him to tell his new head coach, Dan Campbell, to inform the players that they should not actually bite the kneecaps off of Vikings players? They can bite all the other kneecaps they want, but not Vikings players.
Well, my wife, I came home and my wife watched Dan Campbell's press conference, and she said, if I had to pick a head coach that your brother was involved with bringing to the Detroit Lions, that would be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, it basically is Chris as a head coach, you know, the old school mindset that in many ways is not part of football, but still is integral to a team being successful. One thing I want to ask you about, you mentioned the season-ending game against the Lions. That game included a very controversial call of roughing the passer that extended a Vikings drive, allowed a touchdown to be scored. Yesterday, NFL media reported that roughing the passer could be subject to replay review. Any preliminary thoughts from you as to whether or not it's a good idea to put that play, calls and non-calls of roughing the passer, in the bucket of what's reviewable?
Yeah, I know the competition committee is now putting all these rules and proposals together. I know usually we'll meet with the NFL. They give us some statistical analysis on how many actual controversial calls were in the NFL last year on roughing a passer. But there'll be a lot more other things to discuss, too, on some potential rule changes. And it's the process every year. So, you know, also we're going to have to look at a lot of the potential rule changes from what we were able to do with COVID this year, you know, on the flexibility of the IR and being able to bring guys up and down that way, you know, the size of the practice squad. So a lot of those are in discussions right now. And I know those will probably be up at the time when the owner meetings come up here at the end of March. It'll be interesting to see what we learn from this year's COVID rules and any other rule changes, and how it can make the game or make us better at the jobs that we have to do, especially from a roster planning standpoint, and what actually does move forward.
You know, I'm a big fan of replay review for things that are objectively identifiable. Did a guy get 2 feet in bounds before he went out of bounds after catching a pass? Was the ball out before the knee was down? I get nervous about it when judgment is involved, and we saw what happened with pass interference a couple of years ago. What would concern me about roughing the passer is the idea that you're going to go back and break it down frame by frame. There's 10 different ways that you can rough the passer. You see one little flash of something that technically violates the rules, and all of a sudden out comes a flag for roughing the passer when it really wasn't roughing the passer.
Well, hopefully you don't know the angles you're getting to. And I think some of that in the OPI and DPI rule we had a couple of years ago that made reviewable, sometimes you don't have all those camera angles like you do for a national TV game. So you have to make sure that you have it covered by all the camera angles too, if you're going to do something like that.
You know, I thought of you last night when I saw that one of the other potential proposals is a reversion to sudden death overtime. Obviously, that's the change that was made after the 2009 NFC Championship. Short field, couple of first downs, couple of questionable calls. Next thing you know, Garrett Hartley kicks a makeable field goal and the Saints advance and the Vikings don't get a chance to match it. But then I saw what the gist of this new sudden death is with the spot and choose dynamic that the Ravens are proposing. I don't know how much of a chance you've had to study it and review it, but I'll tell you what, it's one of those things where my first thought is, what the heck is this? And then when it's explained, it's a lot more fair than relying upon which way a coin strikes the turf.
Yeah, no, the first time I saw a lot of these new rule proposals was yesterday in one of our committee meetings. And so I think the more we delve into this, I know the competition committee, I know there's a subcommittee of coaches that are heavily involved in the rule changes as well. So I think the more we take a deep dive into this, and I do believe you have to look at it from an analytical standpoint too. What is the potential outcomes if you do make these rule changes? And are they permanent or are they just on a one-year basis to see? So I think there'll be a lot of discussions because there's always two positives and negatives for each rule proposal, but it'll be interesting to hear all the different ideas on these new rule proposals and if they'll move forward or not.
Different scouting process this year, like last year, with some new changes. The idea that you can actually go to pro days this year, they were shut down in 2020. I heard you mention that yesterday in your press conference. How many pro days do you plan to go to?
I'm trying to get to 10 to 15 if I can. It's totally different. Last year at this time, we were able to have a combine, got a lot of our work done there, saw a lot of the players work out at the combine. We were also able to see them play in the fall as well. So when they shut down the pro day visits last year, you always want to get out there to do that, but you had a lot of information already. This year, I think most of the GMs, but I know myself, I never was able to go out and see a college game this year because of the testing protocol and traveling with the team and being in the bubble. The Senior Bowl was probably the most valuable thing we've had so far this offseason, to go down there, and Jim Nagy did an outstanding job on putting that on. We were able to do, I believe we counted 128 player interviews in person. Now we had masks on, we had plexiglass between us, but you actually got to do that in person instead of virtual. And, those things are important too, because a lot of the things you may not see virtually, you can actually see body language and things like that and get a real good feel for the person and their personality. And then just to get to see some of these kids that opted out in 2020, or their schools didn't play till this spring, to see a couple of those guys go down there and participate was huge for us. But this year, the pro days are going to, I think, be bigger than ever because of the limitations we've had and the exposure we've had to a lot of these upcoming draft prospects. So I'm excited to really get out on the road, like most of my counterparts are, I'm sure, to see these guys, see them move around and watch them work out.
For the guys who opted out, or for the guys who played for the teams that maybe didn't play in a lot of games last season, how hard is it to go back to your 2019 film and project from that? It's got to be frustrating because you want to have apples to apples. You don't have the full set of film that you ordinarily would have for a lot of these guys.
No, and we knew that there was going to be restrictions this year. So our Jamal Stevenson, our college director, and a lot of our scouts did a lot of all 19 tape on these guys because we didn't even know if there was going to be a season in 20 for a lot of these schools, and especially the Power Five. But then the Power Five came back alive, and they did have a season. But then you're watching a kid play in 19, and why didn't he play as good in 2020? I don't, the dynamics on were they able to work out at school? Weren't they able to work out at school? What were they dealing with COVID? So there's so many variables that you see some of these kids that played in 19, you said, wow, he didn't play very good in 20. But then you saw a couple of kids that popped up and say, yeah, he took another step forward in 20. So evaluating this year is really going to be a 2-year picture of what you've seen in 19 and what you've seen in 20. And then you're going to have to kind of blend that together and come up with what you think that player is.
You mentioned yesterday that they could get up to 5 virtual interviews per player. Is that unlimited number of players? And what's the time limit for each of the 5 interviews you can do?
Yeah, you're allowed up to 5. You're allowed 1 hour per interview. We already started like most teams have. I sat on 2 or 3 yesterday just to listen in as the coaches talk to the kids. It'll be you're allowed to have an unlimited amount of interviews. I mean, up to 5 per player. That's it. But an unlimited amount of players that you can interview. You can interview 5,000 if you want to. But strategically, we have a plan in place on who we want to interview. Like I said, there was a big help going down to the Senior Bowl and knocking out 128 interviews. So now the coaches can piggyback off that. But and the other thing is, I know, during these pro days, there's going to be no private workouts, no dinners, no things like that. You're at the school, you're doing the work, you're following the rules of the university as far as the COVID protocol, the state and local government protocol, the NFL protocol. But at least we're out there and able to get our hands and not so much our hands on these guys. I shouldn't say that, but just get out there and see them in person.
No matter how much you're able to do in advance of the draft, it's always a crapshoot. First round's a crapshoot. The Vikings have seen over the years at the receiver position, 1 good, 1 bad, 1 good, 1 bad. You hit a grand slam home run with Justin Jefferson last year. When did you first know he was going to be special?
I saw him in 19 and he took a significant jump in 20. And then the question was he just going to be a slot or can he play outside? I think as we went through the process, saw him down at the combine, didn't get a chance to go to see him in a workout at all. But what really stuck out when we actually did start in training camp was that he is such a unique route runner for his size. His ability to drop his weight, to get in and out of cuts. And if you watch some of the highlights, he does get DBs back on their heels and he can turn them. But also his catching radius and his courage coming across, not afraid to take a hit, and his run after catch. And the one thing that really stuck out to us last year was the bigger the games got towards the end of the season, the better he played. And he rose to the occasion and wanted the ball in those critical situations, on that big stage.
How nervous were you back in April of last year as the picks are coming off the board and it's creeping down toward you? And is somebody going to take Jefferson or trade in front of you to get Jefferson? What was the anxiety level in those moments?
Well, I think everybody has anxiety on draft day because it's the unknown. I equated it a little bit to when I talked to the media yesterday on us sitting there waiting for Adrian Peterson to fall to us. And you never know. Do you trade up or do you not trade up? Do you sit there? And a lot of it could be just luck of the draw, too, that he fell to us. But we also prepared that if we didn't get him, what was going to be our plan B and how we were going to proceed from there. But we were very excited and very fortunate that he fell to us. And I think we landed on a pretty good player.
You made it clear yesterday that Kirk Cousins is the guy for this year. He's got 2 years left on his current contract. Salary of $35 million becomes fully guaranteed on March 19. Salary for next year of $35 million fully guaranteed. Would you like to extend, tweak, do something with his contract sooner rather than later?
Yeah, we're not going to talk. I don't want to talk about any of the business that we're doing. In general terms, I know we have some challenges facing us, just like most teams do with the cap going down. A lot of the contracts that we did were pre-pandemic and trying to project where the cap was going to go up. The delta went the other way. There was a pretty significant delta. So we're trying to figure out right now on how we are able to get underneath the cap, but also get enough room so we can improve our team. And I think whether that's through free agency in the draft, we got to get some help on the defensive side of the ball. The offense was rolling pretty good last year, but getting a Danielle Hunter back, getting a Mike Pierce back and Anthony Barr back. But we also got a lot of work to do from a contractual standpoint on more than one player.
And there's a fascinating dynamic, Rick, that I think can unfold as teams look at their rosters and decide that it's not in their best cap interest to keep a certain player and more players become available. then you have other options with guys who aren't currently on your team. I mean, how willing and active are you going to be in after you get through the wave of getting under the cap? You see guys out there who may be dollar for dollar a better value than guys that are still on the roster. Are you going to be willing in those moments to say, hey, I can get best interest of the team. I can get somebody out here who's going to take a contract. I evaluate his skills. I say it's a better value than a guy I have. Are we going to see that happen? And are you going to be inclined to constantly take a look back at your own roster and ask, is there somebody else out there that better fits at a better price what we're trying to do?
Yeah, that's our job. That's what we do, and that's what you're trying to do pretty much 24/7 is improve your roster. The dynamic will be interesting on how many teams do cut players and the value of that player, the type of player that's going to come out on the open market. Just seeing a couple of players already that have been cut. But then you're going to weigh in, how's that going to affect potentially the free agent market? Because if you have guys out there that have been cut and you go that direction instead of maybe an unrestricted free agent, that doesn't affect your compensatory picks down the road. Also, it'll be interesting. I think the top guys will still get paid because there are teams out there with cap, but it'll be interesting to see once that first wave goes through, and if there is a lot of veterans out there that have been cut just because of the cap situation we are in right now, the scrambling teams are going to do to identify those guys and try to add them to their roster. I mean, when a J.J. Watt gets out there was a lot of teams, definitely from what you read off of Pro Football Talk, that there were a lot of teams that were very interested in him. But if there are a lot of caliber of players like that out there, it may be a whole different market than we've ever seen before.
I think the reality, though, is there's going to be a middle class of guys who get squeezed and they have to just take a one-year deal. And there could just be a rash of good players, recognizable names, one-year contract, joining whichever team they can find a spot with where they think there's a fit, where they think they can contend. And that could be a powerful tool in building a team for this year.
Yeah, and that's our job. We have to, every year, every team's trying to improve their roster to fill their needs, and what becomes available, that's your job, to be as aggressive as you can to go out there and get the best players possible to give you a chance to win.
This is going to be the fourth offensive coordinator for Kirk Cousins in his time with the Vikings.
I think it's 6 now in 6 years.
Well, and it's amazing how that door spins, but do you see this as not really a change because it's the same system? It's just one Kubiak passing the torch to another Kubiak?
I think, and I'll defer to Coach Zim and to Coach Clint Kubiak on any of the changes that they're going to make from a schematic standpoint. But I know Coach Zim loves the system we run. I know it fits the quarterback very well. We've built the offense around this system. And the more continuity you have, the more chance of success that you have, as long as you, knock on wood, stay healthy. But I think Kirk's been almost, Kevin Stefanski had a little bit of this system in place when Gary came in and was kind of like the senior offensive assistant and assistant head coach. So this will be the third year Clint's going to be in this system that we're running right now.
We're about the same age. I grew up in the 70s. I discovered football in 72 with the Immaculate Reception game between the Steelers and the Raiders. In the course of that next 12 months, I became a Vikings fan when I was 8 years old, and I remember Super Bowl 8 vividly. I remember Super Bowl 9 vividly. The playoff game in 75 when Drew Pearson pushed off and it wasn't called, vividly. Super Bowl in 76 vividly, and every playoff loss after that. There are plenty of Vikings fans out there, and I consider myself a partially reformed Vikings fan, but I know that they just want one Super Bowl win in their lifetimes. What's your message to the folks who have been waiting, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years or longer, who are saying just one trophy in our lifetimes?
I don't think you're in this business unless you want to win that trophy. And I know with our ownership group and the Wilf family and all the resources they give us, not only from US Bank Stadium, but TCO Performance Center, to the resources to go out and buy the best, I would say buy, but the resources to go out and do contracts on the best players we can get. You know, we walk into this building every day, and the number one goal is to how do we get to win a Super Bowl? And whether that's improving on the coaching side, as far schematically, improving on the personnel side. To me, if you don't walk into your building every day and that's your number one goal, then you're in the wrong business. And our goal and objective every year is to come in here and try to win a Super Bowl.
What would you say to the Vikings fans who look at the team over the past 20 years and say, hey, the Vikings contend every year. They're in the playoff mix every year. They get to the playoffs every other year or thereabouts. Good team, but it always seems like there's some other team every year that has gone fully all in, creates a dominant team, and the Vikings eventually walk into that buzzsaw in a playoff year. How do you strike that balance between building a team that contends on a regular basis versus let's go for the brass ring right now, even if it screws us up 1, 2, 3 years down the road?
If you go and what you're talking about, kind of an all-in approach, the one thing you can't predict is what happens from an injury standpoint. Every year, your goal, I mean, is, and like everybody has the same goal, but if you can get into the playoffs every year, it gives you a chance to have a chance. And if you happen to get hot that year, or this play happens or that play happens, it keeps you going forward. And then it just clicks on that 1 year. I mean, we got close a couple years ago when Case Keenum was our third quarterback that came in here and got us to the championship game. And we just, didn't get it over the hump in Philly that night. But every year you just want to give yourself a chance in the playoffs. And then when it clicks, and I use Philly as a great example, they lost Wentz that year. And Foles came in and was kind of struggling early, but all of a sudden he got hot at the right time and played his lights out, which ended up beating New England up here in the Super Bowl. So as long as you can give yourself a chance to get in the playoffs, and then let's see what happens from there.
Last one for you, and this just occurred to me while we were talking. We've spent a lot of time in the media assessing the impact of Tom Brady's jump from New England to Tampa Bay on other quarterbacks who look at his situation, what he did, and it may be emboldening them to make similar moves. From a team perspective, from your perspective, when you look at what the Buccaneers were able to do in 1 year, what lessons do you take away from that you're comfortable sharing to an audience? Are there lessons to be learned by other teams from that?
Yeah, everybody has their own different philosophies on how they're going to build a team, and Jason Lake did a phenomenal job down there. And even though I cannot speak of other players on other rosters, Tom Brady is maybe the best quarterback that ever played in the game of football. But I also know that they did a heck of a job building a team around Tom Brady too. So it wasn't on his shoulders. They had a good defense. They had playmakers on offense. So they had a good team, and they were just like everything. It's such a marathon every NFL season. And at some point, people were wondering whether they were going to get in the playoffs or not. And all of a sudden, something changed when they came out of the bye week and got on a roll, and you hit that buzzsaw. And so those are the things. And it's not like they had a bye week the first week of the playoffs, and they had to go on the road, and they had to win in Green Bay, which was a tough environment to go up there and win, and playing against Aaron Rodgers. And the stars just aligned, and like I said, Jason and them did a great job putting that roster together, and it clicked for them this year, and they were able to accomplish the goal that they set out.
And that's a great point, Rick. No matter how much work you put in this time of year, or preseason, training camp, regular season, it always seems like it is, for one team, an alignment of the planets in a special way, and it just works. And you just want to be in position that maybe this year, next year, whatever year, the planets line up for you. We'll let you get back to work on getting the planets to line up for the Vikings this year, next year, whenever. Great work last year in getting Justin Jefferson. Congratulations on all your success with the Vikings. We look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.